visits, others are back in the district meeting with constituents. You may have been involved in different constituent events, but it's still a busy time for a lot of members in their home districts and states. Congress left in late July and early August. The House left before the Senate, and right before they left town, they came to a large agreement on a 2-year budget deal, and they froze the debt ceiling, which was about to hit in early fall, late summer.
Can you explain what that means, please? Freezing the debt ceiling?
Absolutely. It means so the United States essentially has debts and has a debt and then has deficit spending, and the debt under a law that was passed in 1974 cannot we cannot borrow money above that debt, the debt ceiling, and if we do, then large rescissions and sequestration takes place, and we can't fund the federal government. And so, because of this 1974 law, Congress has to allow for the debt ceiling to be raised if they're going to borrow more money. And as you all know, we haven't had a balanced budget since the early 2000s. And so, because we run deficits annually, we go over, we annually or every 2 years go over that debt ceiling. And in order to keep borrowing money, we have to raise the debt ceiling. And so they came to an agreement to freeze that debt ceiling so they can continue to borrow money, and they froze it for 2 years.
I guess the terminology is what confuses me. Freezing it to me means put a limit on it. And I don't know how they can they already have a limit. How do they put another limit on it? And how do they put it on there for 2 years?
Well, what they did was they increased the limit. So
thank you.
The Treasury could continue to borrow.
Got it.
If they had not done that, Treasury was saying that we would have come up against the limit in September. And if that were to happen, Treasury could not borrow anymore, so we could not pay our obligations, and we would effectively have defaulted on the debt.
That explains it a little better. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
So as part of that, the debt ceiling agreement, they also passed a 2-year budget increase. And essentially what that does is they increase the fiscal year 20 and 21 spending levels. Most of that wasn't paid for. They had to raise an additional $324 billion to keep funding at levels that weren't impacted by the sequestration law that was passed in 2011, all the way back to 2011. And while the House passed the majority of their appropriation spending bills in fiscal year 2020, the Senate had not started on any of them. And so August will be very busy, both on the Senate side and the House side, trying to come to an agreement on spending bills. And what the spending bills are is they are the bills, there's 12 of them, they fund the government on an annual basis. We're currently in fiscal year 2019, and that ends on September 30th of 2019, so the new fiscal year 2020 would start on October 1st. It's unlikely that they'll be able to pass all those bills for 2020 by that deadline, so they'll have to pass what they call a continuing resolution to fund the government at certain levels.
The good news about this is that we don't run the risk of shutting down the government as we have in past years, because they've come to terms on an overall budget, the spending levels. The appropriations committees now can do their individual spending bills. So Congress, will do that in September. And as Brett said, if they can't complete all the bills by the end of September, they'll just do a short-term continuing resolution just to keep the government operating.
And we don't think they're going to fight this year?
Pardon me?
You really don't think they're going to fight about it? And
No, they won't, because that's why they settled it before they recessed at around the 1st of August. They did not want this problem hanging over in September and going into an election year. Both sides, Democrats and Republicans, were motivated to get a budget agreement to avoid another government shutdown.
Yeah, I'm not really used to the 2-year budget thing. The only agency I've ever seen them do that in is the VA.
Well, the Congress has been doing it now for the last several years. This is about the 3rd time or 4th time that they've done a 2-year budget deal. And this way they don't have to get into the fight next year during an election season.
And the budget's up about 4%, guys?
Yeah, exactly. It's about 4%. What will have to happen on the House side is because they passed virtually all their bills and set their funding levels. They're about $18 billion above what was agreed to in the budget agreement, so they're going to have to find some areas to cut across the non-defense discretionary, and then the defense side will get an increase of about $5 billion. But it is an increase from baseline fiscal year 19 levels.
Okay.
The other very relevant piece of legislative news that came out right before Congress recessed was the Environment and Public Works Committee, which is a committee in the Senate, passed their portion of the reauthorization of the surface transportation law. The current surface transportation law, the FAST Act, lapses next year, September 30th of 2020. So there is some time, but there's a lot of work that goes into passing these large bills, and they're typically 4, 5, 6 years. This bill, ATIA, is a 5-year bill. The EPW portion, which isn't the entire bill, EPW covers the highway portion of the bill, was funded at $287 billion over the 5 years. The other committees of jurisdiction in the Senate are Senate Banking, which cover public transportation, Senate Commerce, which cover railroads, safety, interstate busing, and rail, and Senate Finance, which funds the bill, have not acted on their sections of the bill. So there's still a lot of work to do. On the House side, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, they have all of the jurisdiction of policy for all transportation. They also have not worked on a bill yet, or put a bill out or marked it up. Their timeline was closer to the end of the year, or early 2020. So this was I think, a little surprising for people on the Senate side, because this large, massive 510-page bill was passed out by the committee, because it's a little early, but also the contents of the bill were a little surprising. We sent a series of news items as well as a summary to many of you on the transportation bill and the week that it passed out of the Environment and Public Works Committee. While there is an increase in overall funding, there's also provisions that deal with the new bridge program that would probably be helpful to the county, as well as a climate change subtitle, which includes competitive grants to reduce emissions, policies to look at weatherizing roadways, as well as planning provisions, encouraging planning to deal with resiliency, which was part of the entire subtitle. I think a lot of people did not think this would come out of a committee that's held by a chairman from a rural state, but the agreement came together over the last, my understanding, the last few weeks to get that money in there. There was roughly about $10 billion in that climate change subtitle. And then the regular typical programs were funded at increased levels. The freight formula, the freight discretionary, which you guys have done very well under, was increased by $2 billion under the formula program over 5 years, and the freight discretionary was increased $1 billion over 5 years. There's still a lot of work to do. We're currently working with you all to put together a letter to send out to the delegation, letting them know we like certain things, we'd like to improve on certain things, but that a long-term transportation bill is important.
Yes, it is.
The other item we've worked on is the Veterans Corps graduation. We've been working with different offices to try and get participants from those offices. Senator Duckworth's office has indicated they'll be sending letters to each graduate, which is great. And they're having a staffer come for that graduation. So we've been working on that, and then once Congress gets back in Washington in September, we'll be monitoring legislation around spending bills, of course, which are important to your health and human service dollars, your transportation dollars, your economic development dollars, but also we'll be looking at bills that impact taxes. There's the annual tax extenders bill. There are a few things in there not as relevant to the county, but we'll continue to monitor and send updates on that. And then some different health bills that we'll take a look at and update you all.
Health bills as in something to do, health bills as in something to do with the Affordable Care Act?
No, a lot of it has to, well, you know, there is a lot of overlap with the Affordable Care Act because it touches all parts of the healthcare system. But this has to do more with surprise billing as well as pharmaceutical costs. And there's some different things that are being worked on in the Senate. And really the name of the game is that the Senate will have to pass something. It'll most likely, you know, get sent to the House, and then it'll be agreed upon by the President. There are a lot of things that have been passed by the House, but they can't get the requisite number of votes in the Senate. So there's been a lot of work being done on the Senate to try to eliminate surprise billing for patients that go in, and whether they go to the emergency room, they have surgery that maybe they didn't believe would be so expensive, and then of course some of the cost of pharmaceuticals and medication. They've been working on trying to address that.
That's good news. If it happens.
So those are really the most active items in Washington. We wanted to report on that since we hadn't checked in a little bit, but want to open it up for questions if there are any questions on it.
Any questions? Are you hearing anything on voter security? There's a lot of discussion here in Illinois. They just did a study with all 108 election authorities, and they're looking, I guess there's some big grant money that they believe they're getting, or maybe they've already gotten and they just haven't distributed it yet, and that's why the study, to figure out where it's most likely best distributed. But I'm just wondering if you're hearing anything more about...
Yeah, so in the fiscal year 19 bill, or 18, I think it was 19, there was roughly, I think, $450 to $470 million for election security, and not all of that money was pursued. So I think they're still trying to, I think, and that goes to states, and the states distribute that money, like sort of what aligned with what you just said. So that makes sense that Illinois would have applied for that. They're trying to get more money in the appropriations bills, but I think there was pushback because a lot of the dollars that were allocated originally for that were not spent quickly. And then in terms of election security policy, the House has been more forceful. The Senate was potentially considering some legislation, but ended up not putting that on the floor for a vote. So I imagine there could be some more discussions in the fall, but right now, the Senate's decided not to take up legislation along those lines. But the funding streams, the one that I was talking about, that's still been out there.
Anything else, you guys? No? No? I think that's it. Thank you all so much. Brett, Jim, Catherine, really appreciate it. And even though your emails are quite lengthy and somewhat complicated, I really do appreciate getting them.
Well, good. We want to make sure, we'll try to break it down a little bit more when we send really complex issues. But we're glad that you did those updates and they're informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for calling in, guys. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that covers item 4 and 1 and 2, and old business. I don't think we have any. New business, I know we're going to take a look at the state legislative agenda, so I just wanted to add something, although possibly it comes in under old business, but we didn't put it in our state agenda the last time, so I'm going to consider it new business. The drainage fees, Judy has been reaching out to a number of legislators. She spoke with Pat McGuire and LG Sims, as well as Lindsay Parkhurst, and we met one of her staffers, for those of us that were on the farm tour Friday. And she's also spoken to Senator Laura Ellman about these drainage district fees. And now that we've gotten our tax thing taken care of with getting the appropriate taxes out in the airport, seems like it might be safe to add this to our agenda for next year. I'm getting a nod back there, so I just wanted to mention that she was concerned about that. Judy isn't feeling well, that's why she wasn't here today. I know Beth had an interest in going through the state legislative agenda, so I'm going to ask you to maybe start the comments. What are your concerns? What do you think we ought to be adding or removing?
Actually, I was just wondering what at the state level is happening. I know that we have in the agenda voting on elections and making sure we continue secure and involved elections. And I'm wondering what's happening at the state. I thought Brent maybe could comment, but wondering too what we want to do with our involvement in the county.
Well, the only thing I know about is what I heard on the radio yesterday. Is Brent on the phone? Brent Hasser? No. Yes? No. Only thing I know about is what I heard yesterday on the news, that they had a study with 108 election authorities, because some of the counties have a separate election authority, like Aurora used to, and they may still, but they gave us, no, it's gone. Okay, I was going to say, they gave us back our part of Aurora. So there's 108. So there's some, like Chicago, I think, has its own election authority. DuPage used to, but they don't, I believe, anymore. So I don't know who the other 5 are. Do you know?
Downstate, I think there could be some too. But
is that what it is?
Possibly. But.
So yeah, they're just taking a look at the election security and election processes. I wish I wouldn't have been driving when I heard the story yesterday, because they mentioned the dollar amount that's been authorized for Illinois, but they're doing the study to find out where the money should best be spent. Who should get it, what the priorities are. And I'm sure Nick's going to have something to say about it.
No, I defer to the clerk's office on the money, but I do believe some of that money was distributed and has been utilized. I'm sure there's more in the pipeline are coming, but that's a question that I'm sure the clerk and her staff can answer as far as the election security.
And they're coming next month.
Okay, so that's probably something maybe we tell them and ask
that
them
we're
to
interested in.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally think so much of what we've been updated on and get through newsletters that are in our agenda it's very clear where the state is on it, what the progress is. I just haven't heard a lot about at the state level what's going on with elections, and so I don't know if that means that there's not much, or so that was pretty much my question.
I talked to a couple of our legislators last week and asked for an update on what's going on with elections, and I sent an email to our state lobbyists, to Julie and Brett, to ask if there was going to be any legislation coming forward this fall. I guess there was some discussion in the spring, but it never really went anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, there's ongoing discussions both at the federal and state level, and I'm sure at the conferences that they have with the election authorities, I'm sure it's a topic. It's in the news. It's at every level of government. I think everybody's concerned. I mean, always have been concerned about fair, transparent elections, so I think everybody's committed. I think just with this board, I've heard say is we just want to know what's being done and
Yeah.
what steps are being taken, what money's coming back. Because there's been funds in the past with the previous clerk that came back for various levels of security and equipment and things like that. I mean, the fact that we have paper ballots is a huge plus.
Yes,
which other
they said
counties
that.
don't have that around the country.
Right.
So, I mean, we've taken steps in the past, and I believe our current administration's taking steps, so I think we just want to hear what's being
Yeah,
done.
and as the budget season starts for the county, I want to make sure that we're allocating enough money to make sure we continue to have secure, accessible elections in Will County. It's an important county function, so I'm more interested right now, because it's budget time, to make sure that
The
we're
money
doing
is there.
what we need to do.
Agreed. One other thing from that report, I believe, if I'm not misspeaking, they said that every county and every election authority in Illinois had a paper ballot. Even if you used the machine to vote, it would spit out a receipt, a piece of paper showing, and I haven't seen one of these, but they indicated on the news story that it showed who you voted for. Just like when you take your paper ballot and put it in the machine, there's a piece of paper in that machine when you're done. There is a piece of paper that comes out when you vote on one of those. I don't even know what you call them. So we're like one of the states that has the paper system, which is good. You have something when you're done. And if you want to know, this is kind of a little off topic, but about hacking or trapping, I don't even know what they call it, but I watched an episode of The Good Fight, which is a TV show on Channel 2, and they talked about how our elections can be influenced even without them going into our election system, and through Facebook specifically. And so some people may have noticed more security and different features on Facebook, but they talked about it on this episode of The Good Fight, and it was interesting because now I understand what all the concern was about this fake news, and they explained it all on the show, how it's done, why it's done. It's kind of interesting. Nick, did you? No. Mimi?
This is peripherally related to security, but it's directly related to elections. I've heard some rumors that I haven't substantiated yet, but that there's possibly going to be a bill by Senator Laura Murphy in veto session that would put forward ranked choice voting in Illinois.
Oh, you mentioned that, yeah.
So I haven't.
Can you explain how that works?
No.
Okay. I probably
I mean, I could take a shot at it, but.
And then if anybody
It
wants
means
you,
You're talking about what they do in California.
Yes.
They do that now, but there has to be a minimum, so like in the mayoral election, when they had how many, 7, 8, 9 people in, once you hit a certain number, so say it's 5
Right.
that they pick, then you actually vote, you rank the people, 1 through 5. And so then, if somebody gets all the 2 votes, and even the top person gets 1s and 5s, that 2 person may wind up being the number 1 selection.
oh, that's weird. I didn't realize it worked like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you actually rank each
They do that
candidate.
in California now, and I don't know what the minimum is, there has to be, so if there's 3 people that may not kick in, it has to be a certain number.
I think it was specifically in regards to the Democratic primary, but I was like, I don't even know if we have time to institute that kind of change
No,
by the primary.
there's no
So
way they can do that in a short time. I would like to mention something about voting machines. I think what we're gonna see now is, which we saw at NACO, the new electronic machines that have come out have a paper component to them.
Right,
Because
that's-
everybody needs that. The one that we looked at, which I know Lauren is aware of, you have a paper piece, even
Right.
though you're doing all your voting on.
It spits out a piece of
on
paper.
there. What California was looking into, we saw this at NACO 2 years ago, I think, maybe even 3. They were creating their own electronic system. You would get a ballot at home that you could actually mark up. You go in there and you put it into the machine. And at that time, you still have the ability to go, no, I really don't want that person. You know, something could happen since you got the ballot that you don't want to vote for that person, right? And so you can change your vote, and it was, yeah, taking that guy off. But rather than, you know, change it and scratch out, you change it on the screen and then it would spit out your paper ballot of what you actually voted for. That's the one that we saw. You don't mark it up ahead of time, but you do put paper in there, so there's a paper component. And I think that's all we're gonna see coming out, is something that has a paper component on it. So
Definitely the
some
paper.
backup.
Mike, you're my age or older, maybe, not to point out your age, but
45?
there you go. Do you remember pre-1980 and 1980 voting where there was something with the state reps where, I wouldn't say it was ranked choice, but they had a name for it. Do you remember that it was different when you voted for your state rep? Cumulative is the word. Do you remember does any, Jim?
Sure.
Can you? Sure. I've been wondering for a while what that was back then.
I don't have it done completely, but it was like, there was like 3 reps in every area. You know, you had to have at least one of the opposite party. It was really kind of, so say in a district you could, if you couldn't have like 3 Republicans or 3 Democrats, one had to be, so it was like the 2 highest in one party, the next highest in the other party. I suppose the thought was to give it some balance, you know.
That's what it was.
Party, yeah. But then of course they were like,
I was really trying to remember. I was an election judge that year, and I remember
that's how it worked.
that whole process. I mean, that there was something different than what we do today, and that was the last year that they did it, but I couldn't remember what exactly I did. I mean, this was a while ago.
And it was a bigger, the legislature, I forget how many people were in it, but there was quite a few. You know, the legislature was bigger also, I mean, it had more members.
There were more members then.
Correct.
Okay, all right, very good. Julie?
Yes, I wanted to mention, if you bring up electronic voting and paper ballots, I'm really happy we use paper ballots because several elections ago in DuPage, what happens with those electronic voting systems is that many of the seniors and people with visual impairments, they cannot read or even understand how the system works. And literally what happens is the people working there are running from voter to voter trying to help them vote. And it's just, I think, sticking with the paper system, there's a lot of benefits to doing that, and it's also simpler. Probably costs less than all of this equipment and, but basically, you know, that's one of the problems that we noticed with those types of systems because for different reasons, they get in there and they can't read it, they can't understand how it works, and that I think that's a good reason to keep it simple.
Just so you know, it was in Lauren's report that she gave, the clerk's report that she gave, I guess it was April because I was out of the country, and I did ask for a copy and I did read through it. They are required by law to print 110 or 115% of the number of registered voters, and we all know we never even get 50% of the registered voters, so to print an extra, you know, 70% basically, that just goes in the garbage. So that cost has got to be pretty high, and so just like we have iPads now, instead of getting paper mailed to us, I suspect that this system of electronics would be cheaper. I don't know that. Mike?
Yeah, Lauren and I had a long talk about that. They haven't done that analysis yet, but what it does, like the system that we saw at NACO, what it does give you the ability to do is allow people to vote anywhere.
Right.
They don't have to be in their precinct, because then all they have to do is plug in where they live, and that ballot would come up. So rather than print ballots on demand or anything, it really gives you that ability. The paper cost, and Lauren and I talked about the system we looked at, you're probably talking about a $5 to $7 million investment. And we know the software's got to be updated all the time. So there's probably some trade-offs there. It would save the forest.
Yes.
But it may not save the money in the forest. It may be a wash. But it does give you other capabilities, like being able to vote anywhere in the county, no matter where you live.
That's cool. I didn't know that part about it. It sounds like it's a little bit like the system online where you go in on her webpage and put in your address, and it'll tell you where you vote.
Exactly.
And you could do that from any computer anywhere. So, interesting. Jim?
Yeah, I just want to speak for the visually impaired here.
Go ahead, Jim.
So if you aren't aware of it,
They do voice.
we do have a machine for visually impaired.
Mhm.
You put on the audio,
Mhm.
it reads the ballot to you,
Mhm.
you're able to sign, and then it does print the paper ballot when you do get a paper ballot also. So, having used that, I can tell you it works pretty well. I don't want anybody to think that, we do have machines for the visually impaired.
Yeah, I thought we did too.
So then that's something you should have at every poll.
I thought we did. There was
If they have physical disabilities, there's also machines for that as well, so either one of those. And they've been available for quite a while.
Yeah,
In addition to at all the polls, they also have, at the Centers for Independent Living, people with disabilities can go there and vote, so they don't even have to come into the clerk's office, and they can use the special machines. And we have the special machines downstairs here, and we have had for a few cycles now.
Well, ever since we've changed to the new voting system, we've had those machines.
Yeah.
So,
And Julie, you were looking at DuPage County, if I remember your comments. They've had an independent election authority for a long time, and it had problems. And I think that's why they voted to eliminate it. So I suspect that maybe things would be better there today or in the very near future. Because I think their clerk was just elected this past spring, maybe?
No,
2018, okay,
our
2018.
county does a pretty good job for people with disabilities. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
We really do a pretty good job for those folks.
I think we could do better for people that are bilingual, but that's a different conversation that I'm hoping we'll have next month. So, all right, so that kind of covers some stuff about voting, transportation. I think we got a really good overview.
Can I just to remind people, I know a lot of you were at the committee of the whole, but if you look in our agenda book, we've been working on a lot of these things for many, many, many years, but on page 3 of our agenda book, we had the major project requests. 3 of those 5 are being acted upon.
Right.
The I-80, Ridge Road and Route 30, the 53 safety improvements. We put 40 million, we're actually getting 50 million, along with 800,000 for bike trails and other pedestrian improvements. That's on top of that 50 million, I believe. And then Eastern Will County, it's not directly related, but in our major project request, and then we had a page on that about the work that Lori Summers and Judy Ogala, our DOT, the governmental league, and others, we're working with IDOT on trying to basically get to a point where we have kind of a mini agenda almost for them cooperatively. Like, and one of the things is an east-west road between 394, which is along the Indiana border, over to 57. Because right now, there's no real route except for 80 for trucks to move between, and there are facilities along 394 and 57. So that ties into some of the money that's being programmed for 57. Now there's a lot of details to still be worked out on that 162 million along 57. It's been referred to as the airport money, but it's really, I got some more details on that. It's really about an interchange there, getting trucks or cars over Route 50, which is parallel to 57. I'm going into the weeds here a little bit, I apologize, but there's some work going there. I just want to say that this agenda is important because these things didn't just happen this year. We've been working on a lot of these for many years with the board, with other people, and progress is being made. So in some ways, we do this agenda. I think part of this today was like, what did we accomplish? What do we got to do for next year? There's examples of real progress and success. So I think all of us should be excited that some of these things were acted upon. Some of the other things were more informational, and they're ongoing, but it's good.
Just a question about that exit interchange along 57, because I know Judy brought it up in committee. She was like not happy about which road they picked or whatever. And I don't think it was really explained to us that, the goal was to connect the two, or if it was, it went over my head.
I mean,
okay. And is that the right interchange for that?
I mean, there's Manhattan-Monee Road, which is right at Monee. That's the interchange that on the west side is Amazon, and
right.
Now they're putting in a big gas station.
I saw that.
On the east side is some of the Monee businesses. Actually, our health department and our new CHC center is on the east side. then you go south to Peatone-Wilmington interchange, which is not a full interchange that has a lot of challenges. That's, Peatone basically is on the east side. They have some new developments potential on the west side. So that interchange needs to be improved. The interchange that was always talked about for the airport was, I think, maybe Offner Road, or is that right? Sound right? Offner,
Well,
something like that. But then the bill, capital bill said, actually it's not the capital bill, it's in the actual budget. So that money has to be reappropriated potentially. But they used Eagle Lake Road.
That's the road,
But
yeah.
what I was told is it's going to be somewhere in that vicinity, which is about halfway between those two existing interchanges. And it would be an exit ramp, which then, so there's like, the 162 million was like 50 million for that interchange, 50 million to do it basically an interchange on 50, which is the state highway right next to it. So you'd have on and off ramps there, so people can be using 50, but they also can get onto this road that gets them onto 57. And then there was like 30 million for other arterial roads, which that could tie into some of what we're doing, knock on wood, hopefully. And then there's 20 million for utility work, and then there was some additional money for some regional planning. So that's where that 162 million is going towards. But it's not all set in stone. And
Okay.
one of the discussions we had, I'll tell this group, is when staff, the board members out there, we met with the mayors out there. We were looking at what, we didn't have all that information at that point, and can we tie this into what we're hoping to be long-term with this east-west road? Because if you bring traffic across from 394, it can be any traffic, but we're looking more truck traffic. Can you avoid Moni, which this is the concept, to create a new little connection that gets them down to 50 and into this interchange? So then you would have like a mini east-west road, not mini, it's an east-west road that connects those two highways and gets trucks and things.
Bypass.
Yeah, bypass through Moni, but gets them to 57, because 57 is obviously a major highway that will probably expand in the future, just like 55 and 80 have. But there's, in at least the executive's office's opinion, I think, and other folks too, hopefully, improvements along 57 are good for safety, and it creates economic opportunities. There are developments further north, and this is going to create jobs. Whether the airport goes or not, that's a separate issue for another day, but these improvements are good, and Peatone needs improvements at their interchange we've talked about. I think that's in our item too. The Manhattan Peatone is going to have to be improved at some point because of Amazon and other developments. But the goal of all that effort, and I just share with you all, is we're trying to get communities to work together, and instead of just complaining or saying we need, it's like let's put it into a format that ties in with the county work, and we're talking with IDOT and other people, so that it's, because the only way it's going to get done is all of us pulling together. If they go alone, it's not happened, and so we want to try to, and this is an opportunity with this money to maybe jumpstart some of that.
Well, and it's important, I'd hate to see them make another mistake there like was made at Weber in 55. Full interchange, or space.
Save the space, yeah.
Save the space, don't overdevelop. Because it's gonna grow. People are gonna come, just like they came to Bolingbrook and Romeoville. They're going to come to Peatone and Crete and Wilmington and all those areas, not Wilmington. What am I missing? Peatone, Crete, Moni. They're gonna come, whether we want them to or not. I mean, because we're pushing for the commercial development, so the people will eventually come if we have affordable housing. So.
I had a question back on the first page. The second item is the clean construction and the CCDD stuff. What's the status of because the Illinois Supreme Court.
Right, they did not take the case.
Okay.
So it's over.
Okay.
The case is over.
So we're just gonna live with what we get.
Correct.
Well, I can tell you they're taking that
Legislation change.
clean construction debris from the quarry in Bolingbrook and putting it all over Bolingbrook, so.
Jackie, I don't think it's fair to say we're going to live with what we've got.
You
It's
think
the
we can
case.
do-
There was a case,
Right.
but
There's still
Mary just said there can be legislation, and that's been considered before. But I think the legislators were waiting to see what the courts did. If the courts had taken action, then maybe they wouldn't have had to do legislation. I think that's something we want to probably bring back and have more discussion about. Is do we want to restart our ask for legislation to do some of the things that we asked for? And I mean, this is an ongoing issue with, you know, the CCD people, and then like our landfill, which has liners and all these protections that are required, but it's not something we've forgotten about. It's just we were waiting for the court cases. So I think now if the General Assembly can take that back up and say, well, we're not going to do it through the legal ways, then we're going to have to pass a law that requires certain things. But there's very strong interest on both sides battling on what, so.
Well, I thought that I heard somewhere, and I don't remember what committee, but that there was more that we could do on our side, even under the current law, through our land use department. And I'm not going to say it's not going to cost us money, because that'd be silly.
No,
it would cost us money, but.
Our land use department is trying to ramp up more inspections, more random inspections, and work with the IEPA. And frankly, I mean, Jim remembers this years ago when we started this discussion, the IEPA, under several administrations, really wasn't that engaged on it, it seems like, until they did some surprise random testings, and a bunch of those testings came back hot, with hot being like bad stuff in the mix, and they were like, uh-oh. So that's what got the attention, because as remind you, in Will County, last time I heard this number, over half of our population is on some type of well system. They're not getting Lake Michigan water, so their water systems could be tainted if there was a leakage into this. Now, we haven't heard of any of that, but you don't want that to happen and try to go back and clean it up, because once it's tainted, it's pretty much tainted, and you're going to spend billions of dollars trying to clean it up. So,
Talk to Flint.
right. So, but
Still haven't got that plume of trimming cleaned up.
Yeah.
right, they're still.
Yeah, but they're still giving them something, aren't they, doing something over there?
But I think this is definitely something we should have a more detailed discussion about leading up to next year's agenda, and ask our legislators to consider, you know, we can talk with Brett and Julie, because Brett and Julie really are knowledgeable. They've been involved in literally hundreds of meetings. I sat in one hearing, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, and your eyes are going to roll back to your head listening to the I think they call them taco standards or something. It's like this acronym for what's acceptable in the water quality, and I mean, I don't know, there's all kinds of tables, and it's like what you rank as negative and how bad has a big impact. I mean, it sounds like minutia, but it's like that's going to trigger remediation or fines and things like that. But the challenge is when a truckload of stuff comes in, how is it tested and who's responsible? Is it the truck driver bringing it in, or is it the site they came from? And really, you want to know that the site was clean from the start before you bring it into a site that, and then once it's there, how do you test the existing stuff that's in there and the water supply?
So as a follow-up to that, based on our trip to the farm and learning about how they test organic soybeans and sort them and all the myriad of different things that they do, is there any way we could go on a tour of like a load of the clean construction debris being tested?
So I do know that we're trying to put together a tour of the Prairie View landfill. We wanted to do it earlier, but with the weather, the way it had been, they suggested that we wait a little bit, and so I'm hoping to do it in the fall. We could along with that probably
Add a quarry?
Well, I can check into it for sure, but
we can call the guy up at by Wallen Lake. He's pretty friendly.
I'll make some inquiries and we can see.
I mean, he let me go on a tour with him, but we didn't actually check any of the debris that was coming in and out.
Right.
He just took me around in a truck, explained the history of the facility, what they do, why it's safe, blah, blah, blah. I mean,
There's some
company
kinks we have
propaganda.
to work
but-
out regarding, making sure that it's an open meeting and et
Sure.
cetera, so.
It might be useful, because we've done those tours a number of years ago, and now with all the different board members, it might be useful to start with Prairie View and Laraway. Those are both our partners, Waste Management, because they are required to hold a much higher standard. So you see what they have to do, and then maybe we could do a CCDD site, because then you'll see the difference between what, with our landfill and just the laws, you have clay foundations, you have what monitoring wells, you have the liners, they have all those things. These CCDDs don't have a lot of that stuff. So it might be better to start to see what the more stringent sites are, and why people make the argument they should be held to those. And that's kind of what our legislative proposals in the past and our discussions for years have been, is they should be held to some of those same standards, because you're basically putting them in quarries where they were blasting, creating cracks and fissures in the rock, and then you're pouring materials that might be not real good into those quarries that then it rains on them and it trickles into the wells. But it might be better, because we've been talking about this for a while. It's just Prairie View, they didn't want you to come out there when it was wet and muddy, because you might get stuck or something, or it just smells worse. But now would be a good time.
All those things.
Now would be a good time, because of the work we're also doing with waste management and the negotiations, that you guys get to see firsthand. We have the gas and energy plant, we have the recycling programs that are kind of tied to that, not right there, but it'd all be timely, I think, to do that, so.
Julie?
Nick, I've got a question. I don't know if you can answer it, but Whalen Lake, beautiful. What a great asset to the community. Does Vulcan have any continued obligation to examine that site periodically, or test the water, or has it been given a clean slate? Just wondering about that.
I can check on that. I don't want to comment because I'm not completely familiar with Vulcan. I know what
And
you're talking
it's the
about.
Forest Preserve's
But
property.
Forest Preserve is Whalen Lake, but Vulcan is next door, right? And there's the Elmhurst
Connection.
Stone.
And they continue.
There's a water connection.
Right, but I would guess that our land use department does some type of inspections there, but, and I'll let them tell you all the particulars, but most of these sites, and even like our landfill too, has, in the law, has regulations of like post-closure, that they have obligations. So I would defer to our land use people to give a detail, and maybe that's, when we talk about CCDD, they can run through a high level, because you don't want to know all the minutia. But you need an organic chemistry degree. But we can talk about that, but we do inspections, and we have what they call a delegation agreement with the IEPA, where our guys can go on, because the state doesn't have enough inspectors.
Right.
So they delegate to us, but we need to have a discussion of how aggressive we want people to be. If we want to be really aggressive, there's going to be some pushback, but I think this is too important an issue not to be aggressive in protecting the water supply. So, but we'll get information on, because Will County, the other reason why I think we were a leader a number of years ago is we have, I think, 8 or 9 clean construction demolition debris sites. Some of the other counties really didn't get excited about this because they don't have them. We have these landfills, and I think it's partly because we're blessed with the rocks that they're mining out, and then they have these holes, and they're like, what are we going to do with this hole in the ground? We're going to fill it up with something, so.
Well, if they want to fill up a hole, they ought to fill up the one along Joliet Road over there in the countryside / Hodgkins, because he can't use the road.
Right.
I mean, they literally closed the road down. It's been closed for 20 years, 15. I've been driving around those holes.
Just don't drive it.
Yeah, there you go. But I think Nick's right, I think there's only maybe 5 counties or something like that, maybe even less.
Well,
Jim, is that about right? 4 or 5?
the other danger is down south, though. They have all kinds of strip mines
Yeah,
that technically they could fill too.
yeah. But you got the, what is it,
In
Calumet?
this Chicago region,
Yeah.
there's not that many. We get the most.
Yeah, we've
And I think
got,
we have actually, we may have 5 that are not qualified, but I think we have 11 quarries.
yeah,
So there's more quarries.
there's
So-
active quarries.
So potentially,
Mhm.
there's.
It could go up.
Yeah, it really could.
And if I may, I would say we should never give up this fight. I mean, there may be different approaches that we'll take as we go along.
Mhm.
For example, maybe one of the approaches is, well, then give us the revenue to monitor it. So we can ask for higher fees and we can monitor it. Certainly, our solid waste has some oversight of these. We do get a small revenue stream from this. And we can inspect trucks. These people can go out there, but we don't have manpower to do every truck or to do the research, go look at every site where it's coming from, because it also requires you to know where they're bringing it from.
Right.
To check, right? So, but we should never give up this fight. We may look at different approaches of how to solve the problem, but our groundwater for our residents of Will County is so crucial. And our groundwater is a real resource, you know, we're not right next door to Lake Michigan.
I didn't mean we shouldn't check or follow up or do any of
Well, I
that,
know that. I'm
Jim.
just
I
saying,
just,
we should never
you know,
give
we're
up.
giving up on the Supreme Court. They aren't going to side with us, at least not with the
They're not
evidence
taking
that,
the case.
yeah, they wouldn't.
But
We don't even know.
They're not.
We've had a lot of hurdles, and quite honestly, Nick, you may want to comment, we were a lone voice originally, and we've made progress, we've gotten additional support, and the Attorney General's come on our side. I assume that, I don't know about our new Attorney General, but Lisa Madigan got on it. We changed the mind of the IEPA, we kind of turned the corner because they weren't real supportive of our position initially. And I might also point out that we did have a quarry that was contaminated. And the way they solved it is they just raised the level of contamination that was acceptable. So it's already here.
That's what I was talking about, the committee. when they were
Jim,
talking about-
when did that happen? I don't,
Oh, it happened some time back.
But there's,
But I'm just telling you that,
I don't recall that, that's
that
all.
they changed, well, actually, that happened before it really started to become a real issue.
right. Some of this came about too because of the potential of the Olympics coming to Chicago.
Yeah,
They were gonna
that's
do a
what
lot
the
of
big push
demo,
was.
and they were gonna have to do something with all the material they were gonna demo.
Right.
And that's where they looked at these sites as, so it's kind of a blessing we didn't get to the Olympics because
Right,
they would
yeah.
have been trucking all that stuff to somewhere where they could dump it. And it's, you know, it's the problem is in the, and I'm not an expert in this, so don't quote me, but like the concrete, there's, you know, all these different chemicals and things in it that, you know, and things they did years ago that they don't do anymore because they realized, we probably don't want that in, you know, floating around, but it would have been a mess, so.
Yeah.
But Jim's right, we're not gonna stop this fight because it's too important, but you have the people who build roads and tear down old buildings, they're the ones that fight this because it's a cost for them, but it's gotta be a cost of doing business because we can't with the water supply, because like Jim said, it's all of
What
our
little
business.
water we have left, we want to keep
I
it
mean,
clean.
we're actively working on the water supply issue too, but
Yeah.
the wells are pretty important and they don't recharge or clean up real easy, so.
So, we haven't talked about public health, or the pharmaceutical, or the electronic recycling. The DuPage River study, I thought we got some money for that.
That's kind of an ongoing thing we put in here because unfortunately, this is a long-term fight,
Yeah.
or effort, I should say. We received federal money, and there's a two-step process. You've heard us talk about the federal agenda where you do this, I can't think of the word, but like basically an assessment, return on investment study, which we got that money. It was supposed to be Will County, DuPage County, and the state. We started the process, and then the state had no money because this was during their budget crisis. So Will County and DuPage County made the decision to step up and split it 2 ways instead of 3 ways. So we did do that. We've done it for 3 years, which is what the plan was to get this study done. You've heard me say before, we completed the return on investment study. It was a positive. It met their threshold. Yet this is a good thing. You're not going to spend money on something that's not going to get your value back. So we met that threshold. Now next year we'll be going back to the feds asking, and actually this is efforts ongoing, is as we speak, to get federal funding to do the projects to mitigate. But ideally, we'd like the state to, if they can, step up and start participating because they're part of this solution too. But DuPage and Will County both are committed, and we've had money budgeted in our land use budget to pay the match portion we need to put in because these are match programs. But we're hopeful that this won't, and this is probably a question more for Smith Dawson to talk to next time, is we're hopeful that we don't have to go for a formal congressional appropriation on this, that it can just be funded out of some of their existing like year-to-year funds, which makes it much easier to keep that moving. But anybody who's up in the Plainfield Township, Wheatland Township, DuPage County side knows that when the DuPage River is high, it causes lots of property damage, lots of public infrastructure damage, and causes all kinds of other problems. And so just through some simple dredging and levees and probably still doing some land purchases, which we've done in the past, you buy some of these properties and we turn them over to the park district or the forest preserve, and it just becomes like a green space that's also doubles as a floodplain when you need to store water while the, water's high. But I know in Wheatland Township along Plainfield Naperville Road, there's some serious issues when there's a heavy rain.
And Royce Road.
And Royce Road
is
always
and that's
closed
just
up.
in the Will County part.
Right,
I mean,
right. There's a lot.
on the north part.
There's more in DuPage County
Yes.
just because they've got more residential buildup, but Will County's seen a lot of homes developed along, because it's a nice area, but when you build close to the river and it floods,
It's a problem.
and that goes down, that actually continues on down through Plainfield into the Shanahan Joliet area.
Because they've had flooding too.
So it all has a kind of domino effect, so.
So Nick, what we're seeing is that with all of this new building and these large subdivisions, the areas that are flooding in DuPage and Will County, in Mimi and our district, are the older established neighborhoods, not these new subdivisions. So they're diverting all the water and then we're underwater. 87th Street, we're bordered by the Springbrook Prairie, what a blessing that is, yet we flood right next to the prairie. And Royce is always underwater. So what has the county done, or the Forest Preserve, could you let us know what properties they've acquired to help?
We can get a history.
that would be
Those were
helpful.
more down in the Plainfield area, kind of along Lockport Street. There were some properties down there because those were like habitual flooders. And when the FEMA comes in and has to pay like insurance payouts or whatever, it was like, this is where you get your return on investment. They take a calculation of how much they're spending on insurance payouts, and it's just not really financially smart to keep paying insurance costs on a home that's going to continue to flood. But the challenge, and I've lived this personally and seen people live through it, is the newer subdivisions now, they have a lot better practices as far as retention ponds and better drainage. It's the older communities, and even in the northern Chicagoland area, my in-laws in Des Plaines, they flood all the time. And to go in and retrofit storm sewers is very, very costly. In most communities, it's cost prohibitive. So people just continue to have their basements flood. And out down here, we've done a lot to improve that, but this DuPage River is just one piece of that. There's still other areas.
Yeah.
But like when we built the 95th Street extension, that was a big consideration. And you'll notice on, like, especially on the Bowling Brick side, there's big swaths of land that are there to absorb the water. And the Forest Preserve has that confluence area, which also protects a lot of those homes from flooding. So
And the water was literally not even a foot under Kings Road, that bridge, and it stayed that way for almost a week.
we also have, I mean, this is another thing I just remembered. Our EMA got a grant a number of years ago. They have monitors along the route. There's like sensors that monitor the water flows, and I think you can go on a website and actually see what the water levels are. We can probably get that link, but it's something you don't know unless you're in that business, but I'll see if I can get
But
that.
they had a
for
camera on the Royce Road Bridge too, so that you could go online and look to see when it was passable again. But they did build that little extension off Wallen Lake that goes over, I believe, to the DuPage for when it overflows. That water comes into Wallen Lake. There's a bridge that goes over right next to the quarry, and it goes over that new inlet area. And I'm pretty sure that water comes from the river. It doesn't come, I mean, maybe some comes from the quarry, but the majority of it comes from the river, and it's like a runoff point. And that has helped too. So, we definitely are going to be looking for new items to take up on our state agenda. Like I said, Judy mentioned the drainage district. I don't know what else anybody else has in mind.
It's never too early to start. Right?
No, that's
we can
that's
start.
why I'm soliciting ideas.
We're going to start early.
I'm soliciting.
For sure.
But
Yeah.
this wasn't, I mean, we try to do everything we do, continually improve it. This was a big step forward, but there's a lot of other things there's a lot more things that we've talked about at this committee that can be improved upon, and we want to continue to improve on. Like, we would like to, one of the things we didn't do, and I'll just admit this, is this book was an improvement, but we would like to have a executive summary type document, which we didn't end up doing, but I'd like to work with the board, and we can do that for next year. Because then you have a cheat sheet when you talk to your legislators or you talk to your municipality. Yeah. These documents have always been educational and advocacy tools, and not just education for you, but for the people we share them with. And certain members of the General Assembly and Congressional delegation do read these. I mean, they read them cover to cover because most people don't do this. And when we started these, DuPage County had a much better book than we did. Theirs actually, I thought, was a little less complete this year, and ours was better, which is always my goal, to be better than the neighbors. So.
It took us a little bit longer because we got a late start. So this year, though, I think it's imperative that we get started early and have it prior to that initial session, so that they can take it in and really help. I mean, obviously we got a lot of stuff from the Capitol bill and whatnot, but we want to make sure that they are aware of the direction that the board wants to go in. So.
Absolutely. So if there's not anything else at the moment on the state agenda, and we'll just keep talking about it at each meeting, because I'm sure each of you hears about different initiatives or different things that maybe we want to take a look at. The next thing on our agenda, let me get back to here, is regarding minority programs, and the full text of Senate Bill 534 is here. I know I've heard discussion around the county that maybe we should have a minority hiring ordinance. I don't know, ordinance resolution maybe is the better word. But this is one that's been introduced at the state level, and it's within the Department of Labor with their apprenticeship programs, and they're just trying to identify barriers to minorities gaining access to construction careers, make recommendations to the governor and the General Assembly for policies to remove those barriers, that the department may hire staff to perform the outreach in promoting diversity. There is an advisory board for diversity. So there's a lot of things going on in this bill, and I do not believe it's been passed yet. Denise, did you have something?
I'm just going to add to that, and it hasn't been signed yet. But in respect to what we're doing here, we've had some discussions with firms who help set up minority programs. Because the gist of this is, if you're getting any kind of state money, you're going to need to comply. And all of you know, our history here in Will County has not been good. So we're trying to make some changes to that, gradually working on how we include people from everywhere instead of a limited group or the people we traditionally had. So looking at that, Joel and Dave have been paying attention to the contracts and putting in language that's changed, done some work with some minority consulting firms, or diversity consulting firms, I should say, about how we would set up some kind of policy or practice. So that work is ongoing. The city of Joliet is also doing some work, and we are kind of partner with them in the sense that they are using some people that are not the ones they traditionally use, and we are paying attention to that work. Dave has gone over and looked at it and has a chance to use that vendor to do some projects that we have going forward. So gradually beginning to change the way we look at stuff, and not just on the contracting or construction piece, but on all our purchase orders. Who are we buying things from? Are there ways they can be broken down so that more people have an opportunity to participate? If you'll remember when we were doing the work, letting the contracts for sheriff's facility and for the courthouse, we asked the vendors to break those down into more packages, to do the workshops so that more people could have a chance to see how we're set up, to look at the ways we could bring in different subs. Gilbane conducted a number of workshops along that line. We pushed, first of all, to have it be Will County people, Will County workers on the jobs. And now we're looking to see that among those people, what's the mix? Are we getting any diversity at all there? Are we getting any MWBs, DWBEs in there? And why not? What are we doing to change that?
And
so
it
is an ongoing work for us.
They're real specific in this bill about numbers. 7% awarded to women-owned businesses, 2% at least awarded to business owned by persons with disabilities. So they've gotten real detailed into what they're expecting from this diversity, and I'm happy, but I'm concerned because I'm worried that we won't be able to find businesses to bid, and I'm guessing that's what Mike's gonna raise his hand about. Go ahead.
You know, my caution is, as much as we want to include the diversity program, we gotta make sure that, number one, who's certifying it? Well, we have this problem in Chicago all the time. They have these rules. It generally costs about 20% more to include participation from all of these different things. We also have to watch out. What winds up happening is companies set up to be pass-throughs. And Chicago Regional Purchasing Council used to do certification, kind of got away from it because they were certifying and they weren't checking enough. So a lot of it has to do with who's certifying it. If all that's put onto us, it's an mountain of work. So even when the state says this, if the state's going to give us a list of all these people that are certified that they are a true company and not just a pass-through company with a figurehead that gets a check, I'm all for it, but I don't want to pay 20% more just so there's a pass-through company and we wind up dealing with the same company we always deal with and they just get the check to a single owner who all he does is collect checks from the minority.
Yeah.
So we have to go slow and make sure
Yeah.
we get all those things laid out ahead of time.
And that is a part of the work that would happen if we use, whether we use someone internal or an external consultant, it's them making sure that we have a program in place that allows us to do that work. Because one thing we don't want, at least I certainly don't want personally, and I've said this, is to set us up so that we are shamming.
Right.
That does not help people who are different to get ahead. And I just would not support that. I need for people who have not had the chance before to be able to participate and to participate in a way that actually helps them get the experience, get the grounding, be able to go forward and be successful.
And helps
that's the goal.
us. And helps us, because it wouldn't make any sense to choose a contractor that, or enter into a contract with somebody just based on minority status that couldn't actually complete the work at the quality that we need. So, you know, it's both and Steve.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff with the SBA, and I go to a meeting once a month, and Hub Zone is just about all of Joliet. Not all of it, but it's a 95% of Joliet.
What was the term you used?
Called Hub Zone.
Oh, okay.
And that's an underserved economic development area. And that implies that it's not based on anything except economics. 3% of all government contracts, federal government contracts, have to go to Hub Zone. Well, they can't meet the 3% threshold. So you run into a problem with that. That's a huge problem because now the people that are in charge have to improvise to try to get their contracts covered under Hub Zone. And even after they improvise, they can't meet the quotas. So, you know, when we start talking about this stuff, there's a lot of problems. There's a problem with the unions because now they're going to have seniorities. And then also, like in the building trades, certain people can only do certain things because the other people aren't trained enough to do it. So there's a lot of factors that we talk about when we in this line of conversation that really aren't being addressed. You know, we can create a law, say you got to have this number. All right, well, if they can't find a person, do they get somebody that's less qualified
Right.
just to make it
And that
so
was my
it's
concern.
diverse?
Right.
The answer is yes, because they got to get the job done.
Right.
And same thing with companies. So there's way more involved with it than just saying we got to make in a contract, you got to have so many people. Yeah, you might get the people, but you'll get a crappier job.
Well, we at least have to try to start to be more cognizant.
Well,
I mean,
businesses, I'll tell you right now, all these businesses that I see, they don't care if you're pink. They don't care if you're from Mars and that's your religion, Martian. If you're going to do the job, and they make money, that's all they care about. And, you know,
Thanks, Steve.
it's
Jim?
important.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you look at the federal procurement, especially on the defense side, you know, they have all these rules or preferential kind of deadlines to get minority status, veterans, disabled veterans, minorities. And they do it in a way that, you know, they're not paying more money. I just think that looking at some of the federal procurement could be a good guideline on how they do it. because they do not compromise either on cost or quality. Of course, the punishment is if you don't deliver, you're out
Right.
for
But they have
5 years or
a
whatever.
broad area to look in too. They have the whole country.
And so, having said that, even Joel may know something about, he was in the Navy for 20 years, this is what he did. He might also be able to shed some light on this subject, I just want to point that out.
And he is, as a matter of fact, he is starting to do some of the writing. Joel and Dave both working together to do some of the writing. And I'll just say one other thing. There is provision, if there absolutely cannot be found a person who meets the right qualifications, you can do an exemption and go around that. So you don't have to have shabby, crappy work.
No.
And just for the record, there are plenty of people out there who can and will do the work, and it can be quality work. The effort has not been made to search those people out in the past.
Exactly.
And the law now requires that you do that. And that's really the only thing that's different, is that you have to broaden the net. You have to make that an actual effort, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and to have the checklist to show that we've made the effort and do that, because it's well, enough said. Julie?
Do we have any specific complaints in Will County, or do we have any areas of concern right now, currently?
We've had
Yes.
complaints, yes. Yeah, just in the building of the courthouse.
Our history is not good.
No,
I
at all.
realize, I'm
And-
asking what
And
are
because there are complaints around purchasing, around construction, contracting, all of it, yes.
Mhm. Yeah, and just in the short time that I've been on the board, I mean, there've been a number of times, so.
It is more complex because labor gets involved, organized labor has issues.
There is
It's
that.
a little bit more complex, I think, in the saying that we don't try to seek them out. I mean, it's,
Jackie, our
Steve?
group in the SBA has been out to Joliet probably 5 times now, meeting with the Black Chamber of Commerce. We're trying to get them all involved. And it's a process. They all want to get involved, but the process is very cumbersome. And so we're already working on that.
Right, so we need to keep working
Yeah,
on it.
and
The
we
county
will.
just wants to,
I just got an award from, for legislative outreach from the South Suburban Black Chamber of Commerce for all the stuff that we're doing.
well, like I
I'm just
said,
saying, we're really active trying to get these people qualified because we need them.
well, this has been, apparently it's been signed by the governor. I didn't know it was signed yet, but it does take effect January 1st. And, you know, if the state is doing it and they're pretty much, I mean, we just need to do the same thing because we have had problems. We have. Rachel?
Yeah, I have a question. So Joliet has a ability that if it's 5% of the quote, they can choose if it's a local contractor, and I know that has caused some problems because some of our black unions are out of Chicago instead of Will County. Does Will County have, do we currently have a policy like that?
No, and that, you missed it because you came in later, but that was the beginning of our discussion,
Okay.
was the fact that the state has passed this law. We've had problems in the past in our county, and we'd like to clean up our act. I've heard it discussed in different meetings with different individuals, and we need to start looking at it. I don't know, Denise, what committee would get that assignment to put together either a resolution or an ordinance, or,
It would go to executive.
okay.
And that's really where we've been working on it so far. Not in the committee necessarily, but in the leadership, with HR,
With this outreach to these
Consultants, yeah.
consultants that are working with Joliet. Mike?
Regardless of what we do, and I know it'll take a little time, the way I read this, any state grants that we get over $250,000, we have to follow the rules.
Yep,
So
starting January 1.
I think the first thing we ought to do is kind of look through the last 2 years and see what grants we got that were over that number, so we can kind of be prepared. I know the CAC gets some big money, I don't know if that would apply, but we gotta look at a couple of those things now, so at least we know what we're.
That's a very good
Our
idea.
stuff here, we've got time to work our.
But looking at what we
The stuff that
did,
we get money, we don't
Yeah.
wanna lose the money. because
No,
we're not compliant,
no,
so.
you're right, looking at what we
Part
did.
of the work is for purchasing, to be looking at our contracts and to see where we stand historically, so that we know how much further we need to go, and we have some sense of, how far afield we are.
Okay.
So,
Beth, did you want to say?
That was my earlier question or point. I would love to know how much this affects of projects that we have or grants that we receive, I
state
would
money.
love to know that.
State money over
It already is
250
true
in
for
grant.
federal
But I
money,
mean, how
and now would be all
specifically,
state
what does
money.
that mean at the county, like
Right.
you suggested, I just want to reiterate that,
Yeah,
I
we need to
think
get a
that would
list,
be
so-
super helpful.
Okay. And we do have somebody working on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me go back to our agenda. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to comment on regarding that or any other new business? So just to let you know, next month, we are going to have the county clerk in to talk about elections. And it looks like the following month, which would be October, we are likely going to have committee of the whole, but also at the legislative committee, maybe possibly starting to discuss the cannabis and how that's going to affect us. We are not going to meet the state's deadline of September 30th to implement any kind of tax in January, but as far as we know, if we go that route, we will be able to implement it later once we do whatever we need to do to make that happen. And I'm going to try and get some experts, I guess you'd say, in to talk about marijuana just in general. And I did get, through participating on a conference call with ISACO, the Illinois Municipal League's template for an ordinance. They had 3 different versions. I have not had a chance to read it yet. I just got it yesterday. But they have like some sample language. But there were still an awful lot of questions on different things that would be affected, how they would be affected. Just lots of unknowns. So,
And so, Jackie, one thing I would ask, are you asking then to have a committee of the whole in October regarding the marijuana? Okay, all right,
yeah,
just making sure.
Denise
Sure.
and I talked just briefly about it last
Okay.
night. Maybe the same time frame we did it last time,
Sure.
which was after
It's the second
the second executive.
Mhm. Yeah, okay.
So people can go ahead and just kind of plan for that for October. Any public comment? Questions from the public? Hello, public. No public comment? Anybody want to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none.
I just wanted to
Yes.
let everybody know there's an ISACO large county caucus meeting on Friday.
This Friday?
So I'll report back about that.
Oh, awesome, thank you. I don't have any other announcements, we don't have an executive session. Can I get a motion